So we will now begin our second keynote and plenary session on the role of government in building the impact economy, lessons from around the world. Let's welcome our moderator, Regional Head of East Asia of Asian Venture Philanthropy Network, Mr. Ken Ito, to stage to introduce our keynote speaker.
Thank you very much for the introduction. Hi, my name is Ken Ito. I'm a regional head for East Asia at ABPN. I'm very honored to be a moderator for this session. And as mentioned, that this session is about policy. The policy matters a lot to form a social economy. And we know that the policy sometimes take a lead to make a social change. And also they can endorse the movement from the market to form an institutionalized way to materialize the social change into a social system. So in this session, we'd like to explore the opportunity and challenge for the policy implementation, policy development and implementation to accelerate the social change. So we have the distinguished the keynote speaker, Mr. Tristan Ace. Tristan has been with the British Council to lead their flagship program for the policy development for the social economy. He has been leading this initiative over 10 years in different regions in Asia and Europe. The immediate before this position, he was in Myanmar to lead this regional initiative, but now he's the global lead for the partnership and development for social enterprise. Okay, so shall we jump into the keynote? So Tristan, please.
Okay. Okay, thanks, Ken. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a privilege to be with you here today at the Social Value Summit. And I'm delighted that Taipei is hosting such an important event, not least because it affords me a reason to be in one of my most favorite cities in Asia. I'm also delighted that this network, which has its origins in the UK, has achieved such a global presence, and that Social Value Taiwan is playing such a critical role in leading efforts to more effectively measure and account for value that social entrepreneurs and social innovators across this region are trying to achieve. Indeed, the British Council's own evaluation framework for our global social enterprise program, which Ken referenced a moment ago, has been informed and designed by the work of the Social Value international community. So this morning I want to talk specifically about the role that governments are playing in building a new architecture for the impact economy, an architecture which is increasingly placing social value and how we measure it at the core of thinking of approaches to policy and legislation. The British Council, as Ken mentioned, has been working globally for many years to support governments in developing this new architecture. We do this because we're keen to share the lessons that we've learned in the UK and also learn from our international partners about how governments are innovating in building economies that promote enterprise and investment that is centered on prioritizing the creation of social value and social impact. And in doing that, we achieve the British Council's aim, which is to build trust and understanding between the people of the UK and peoples around the world. Only last month, I was privileged to moderate a global policy dialogue in Ethiopia, in Addis, at the Social Enterprise World Forum, where we were delighted to yet again welcome a significant delegation from Taiwan, and was really, really encouraged to hear some of the exciting policy initiatives that have been led by the Taiwan government. So today, I want to do three things. First of all, I want to talk a little bit about the context within which we're seeing innovation in policy around the world. And I think it was a slight exaggeration. My lessons are primarily from the Asia-Pacific region and the UK. Secondly, I want to discuss some of the different approaches or strategies that we've seen governments take. And I'll take some time to look at the different policy levers that governments have been using in order to build this new economic architecture. We heard about some of them in the first panel this morning. And then finally, I would like to think about some of the opportunities and challenges that governments have in really bringing about the transformational change that's required if we're serious about addressing the challenges that we all face. So first of all, let's explore the context within which governments are really thinking hard. And I think it's really exciting, some of the innovations that we've witnessed in recent years. But I hope that, to start off with, you will indulge me a little bit. So I wanted to start by sharing this painting with you all. It's called Devolved Parliament. And it's by a very famous British street artist, many of you will know, Banksy. Now, although nobody really knows who Banksy is or what motivated him to paint this picture of many chimpanzees who've apparently taken over the House of Parliament in London, I think this striking image is widely considered to be a comment on the challenge that governments have in maintaining their relevance in a world, in a globalized world, where increasingly the challenges we face are cross-border, where they transcend national borders, and where multinational companies in some cases are larger in financial value than nation states. As the artist himself pointed out somewhat ominously, laugh now, but one day no one will be in charge. So I think there's a really important question here about how we reimagine the role of government in this current context. But I think there's a second reason why I wanted to share this image with you. In October this year, the painting sold for almost £10 million. Now, the fact that a painting by an anonymous street artist, whose very role in society is to challenge the art world itself, can sell for such a huge amount of money, I think raises questions about how we measure and account for value itself. And as the art critic Robert Hughes pointed out here, the price of a work of art is now part of its function. Its new job is to sit on the wall and get more expensive instead of being the common property of humankind. So the question of how a piece of art that was painted to create public value or social value can be sold for such a large amount of money raises many questions around what we value, how we cost it, and how we measure its social impact. So I think this helps us really to frame our conversation over the next 20 minutes or so. Firstly, how do we reimagine and reframe the role of government in the context of the challenges that we face? And secondly, how can governments more effectively measure and account for the public value so that all citizens have access to opportunities and services that improve their lives? So although this, I think, perhaps paints a somewhat gloomy picture, I actually think there is some real cause for optimism, as we can see here. So around the world, but particularly across the Asia-Pacific region, you see governments thinking really, really hard about how to deliver new innovative policies that can promote social innovation, that can promote social entrepreneurship, and that can more effectively account for social value. Earlier this year, I was in Thailand at the ASEAN +3 Social Enterprise Conference, which celebrated the culmination of almost 10 years of work with the passage into law of the Thai Social Enterprise Promotion Act. And it's fantastic to see such a large delegation from Social Value Thailand here today. This is a project that's very close to the British Council, and it's a great example of the importance of learning and sharing between nations over many years. We've hosted numerous visits of Thai policymakers in the United Kingdom and vice versa with policymakers from the UK in Thailand. And as we participated in those visits and shared dialogues, we've learned a huge amount about how to build that policy architecture in our respective countries. Just down the road in Malaysia, the newly established Ministry of Entrepreneurship Development recently launched their social enterprise certification process. And we're currently working with the MED around looking at how we can potentially think about new forms of enterprise, new forms of social purpose business in Malaysia as well. And then in Pakistan, in partnership with the UN, with United Nations Economic and Social Commission for the Asia Pacific, and Social Enterprise UK, together we launched the first white paper on social enterprise policy in the country, designed to address key issues of employability for the vast youth population and to support women-led social enterprise as a vehicle to reduce the gap in opportunities between men and women in Pakistan. So through our partnerships with organizations such as UNESCAP, with AVPN, who I know are here today as well, through the Andy Network, who I know are also here, the British Council has been working now for many years to support countries in developing these new policies. So likewise, going to the UK, going back to the late 1990s, we've seen significant innovation in the way that successive governments have attempted to introduce new policies with a particular focus on social enterprise and social investment. And I'll talk a bit more specifically about some of these examples over the next 10 or 15 minutes. So at the British Council, we've been developing the capacity of policymakers for a number of years now, and have developed an extensive policy program which typically looks at 4 policy levers that governments might prioritize in the creation of a new economic architecture. So first of all, as we talked about earlier in the first panel, we talked about innovation in the legal and regulatory frameworks that can support different types of social purpose businesses. Secondly, governments can use their financial muscle to seed social enterprises or to build a social impact investment market. Thirdly, governments can build markets by encouraging businesses and indeed use their own resources to purchase more social value. And then finally, governments can play an important role in attempting to support and capitalize on the latest in technological developments to build the new economy, both in terms of putting in place mitigation strategies and raising awareness and encouraging broader behavior change within society to help build that more impact-oriented culture. So I'll spend a bit of time now talking about each of these 4 areas in turn and some of the innovations that we're seeing in different parts of this region particularly. So one of the key developments that we've seen in recent years is the emergence of accreditation, certification, and in some cases, even new legal forms that explore how you get the balance between impact and profit. So we've seen a range of approaches ranging from the purest form of social business to ideas of inclusive business, fair trade, B Corps as well. And I've highlighted there in red some examples from countries that have attempted to institutionalize these forms within their certification or even legal forms as well. And I mentioned the Thai example, but Vietnam also in 2013 passed a new enterprise law which had a specific social enterprise article. In the UK, in 2005, we saw the launch of the Community Interest Company, which was the first new business form for over 100 years. It's a company which carries out commercial activities to fulfill a community purpose. But I think that what was so important about this development was that it created a framework to encourage social or impact investment into social enterprises, as it allowed for social investors to obtain a return on their investment. And therefore, there was no longer a binary choice between investing for profit and donating to social causes. There are now about 13,000 of these in the UK, which has proved reasonably popular. And as I mentioned earlier on, with the passage into law of the Thai Social Enterprise Promotion Act. Now, I talked about some of the learning that's happened over the years between the UK and Thailand, and I think there's some similarities between the two approaches, but I think that in some cases the Thai approach goes somewhat further in that it really stipulates and places a greater emphasis on sustainability and on the environment. So what are we seeing then in terms of trends in the region? We're seeing some really, I think, encouraging statistics around what social enterprises are doing. And this data comes from the British Council's social enterprise surveys, which now exist in many countries in this part of the world and in South Asia as well. So we see social enterprises empowering women. We see them increasingly led by young people. We see them supporting some of the most marginalized and excluded groups in our society. We've seen massive recent growth, so exponential growth in recent years. And what's interesting about that growth is that many of the newer forms are taking for-profit business forms as opposed to traditional charity forms, which shows a much more greater emphasis on trying to achieve scale in terms of the challenges that we face. And I think what's really interesting also, and perhaps not surprising, is that we're also seeing in many cases greater innovation within social enterprises than as compared to the broader SME community. And I think that kind of makes sense when you look at the challenges we face and the demand for new solutions to addressing those challenges. So I'll move on now to talk about the second area of policy, which is emerging around how we innovate to encourage more money or different types of money or different ways in which we use that money to address some of the critical challenges that we all face. Many of you will, of course, heard about this huge figure of 2.5 trillion, which is the estimated funding gap to achieve the SDGs. And of course, we're all aware of some of these wicked problems that we face, whether it's climate change, whether it's youth employment, whether it's aging societies, social housing, some of these problems that demand entirely new, interconnected solutions in attempting to address them. So we're seeing real innovation now in how governments can really try to crowd in private capital to address these problems more effectively. And I think that one of the innovations in recent times which has attracted a huge interest is the emergence of the social impact bond. Developed in the UK by Social Finance, an instrument which raises money from the capital markets for social enterprises and charities to address chronic social problems. Governments can pay interest to investors on these bonds based on the results achieved by the beneficiary charity or social enterprise. So what they are attempting to do here is tap into private capital to address entrenched social problems. If the cost or incidence of the social problem is reduced with comparable or better results than a government program, the investor makes the money, and if not, then they don't. And of course, I think, although we've now seen since the very first one back in 2013, there are now over 100 around the world, and including many in this part of the world too. I think it was Ray who mentioned the potentially need for tax incentives for social investment. And in the UK, we piloted a few years ago the social investment tax relief, which offers a 30% relief for social investors. Now, I think for both of these innovations, it's still too early days to see the broader impacts of them, but I think what they do demonstrate is that governments are really thinking much harder around how they can be more innovative in addressing some of the social challenges that we all face. So in this part of the world, we're also seeing the huge rise in philanthropy. Again, quite significant growth in recent years. So there's a real question around how we can use this emerging philanthropy in this part of the world. And in China, you see the statistics here, in order to maximize and enhance social value as well. So I think there's a huge opportunity in the field of venture philanthropy, and our partner AVPN, I think, will be speaking at the conference and talking about their work to further this field. And again, to give one example, which I think is really exciting from China, is the work of CASV in the Social Value 99 Index, which has tracked the social performance of the top 99 companies on the Shanghai and Shenzhen stock exchanges, and has found that over a period of time they've outperformed the market. So actually looking at how you mainstream that social impact within capital markets as well. Okay, so the third area that I referenced at the beginning was how you build markets for social enterprise. Some social enterprises need investment, some may not, but all social enterprises need customers. And so this should be something that all governments should be thinking about, and how we can actually build customers to help grow the market for social enterprise. And these are just a few examples from around the world. This is the Think Social, Produce Social, Buy Social campaign in Sri Lanka, where we've seen real efforts made to try to create a culture of purchasing more from social enterprises, both from the general public, but also from within supply chains as well. And then there's the Buy for Impact campaign that was from Malaysia, trying to encourage more ethical consumer behavior in that country. And in the UK, we have the Buy Social campaign, and you might see some badges around the conference over the next 2 days, which are there to try to promote more ethical behavior by consumers, but also businesses. And they have the Buy Social Corporate Challenge, which is encouraging corporates, big multinationals in the UK, to buy more products and services from social enterprises. So we see efforts to try to grow the customer base for social enterprises led by government. Another area which is increasingly of interest is how governments can purchase more social value with the huge amounts of money that they have to spend. And back in 2012 in the UK, we passed the Public Services and Social Value Act, which stipulated that when a local commissioner was commissioning a public service, they needed not only to think about value for money, but also to think about the social value that was being created by that enterprise. So if not only are you delivering that service, but you're also demonstrating that you're employing a group of people that have been out of work for a number of years, or people that have been recently released from prison, you are not only delivering that service, but you're also delivering additional social value and probably saving government money somewhere else in the system. So looking at procurement, social procurement, I think is a really interesting area for governments to really try to maximize how they use public money in delivering more effective social value that produces more and greater social impact. So finally, I want to talk a little bit about this idea of building this new economy. And we've heard about some of these examples already, and the role that governments can play in trying to promote the building of this new economy. So going back to 2013, under the leadership of the G8, the previous UK government launched the G8 Task Force on Impact Investment. It led to the establishment of the Global Steering Group for Impact Investment and really galvanized global leadership in trying to promote this agenda. We've heard already about the Impact Management Project, which I think is a fascinating and really exciting development. Earlier this year, we launched the Impact Investing Institute in the UK. And at the University of Oxford, we have the Government Outcomes Lab, which is an attempt to value social outcomes all over the world so that you can compare what it costs in Australia to keep somebody out of prison or to rehabilitate somebody who's been released from prison with what it costs in the UK, and use that to try to build, to help support shared practice and shared learning as we address some of these challenges together. We've also seen innovations in the field of international development. The Global Innovation Fund, a collaboration between traditional bilateral and multilateral donors, is really encouraging innovation in emerging and developing markets. And an example, finally, is of Bethnal Green Ventures, which is a tech-based accelerator famed for launching the world's first social enterprise mobile phone as a way to start disrupting the way in which we think about technology and the potential it has to deliver huge systemic impact. So hopefully over the last 10 or 15 minutes, I've been able to give you a flavor of some of the innovations that we're seeing. I said I wanted to talk briefly about what are some of the challenges and opportunities to really further this agenda. And there's a few things I would say based on the experience that we've had in working with governments across the region. First of all, you really need to find that champion within government and really nurture that person. Often, it's not particularly strategic. It's about an individual who has been inspired by this movement and really wants to instigate change. And you need to find out who that is and work with that person in order to effect change. The second thing I would say is you really need to inspire civil servants and bureaucrats. These are the people that will need to implement these policies. So capacity building programs, training programs, helping them to understand how we can make their lives easier through these emerging policies is a really important thing to do as well. And the third thing I would say is, and perhaps the final thing I would say is you need patience and you need to be resilient in attempting to engage in this agenda. I noticed at the beginning, I don't know quite where you got that photograph, but in that photograph I had brown hair. It was about 3 or 4 years ago, I think. And now I was looking at my beard today and it's all gone white. And that's what happens when you work with governments. No, I'm just kidding. Over a longer and extended period of time, but you need that resilience and persistence if you're going to effect this change, because government policy takes time to change. So I'll conclude there. I will just finish off by saying the British Council's work in this field will continue. We really look forward to working with governments across this region in trying to really innovate in delivering the new economic architecture that we need to build the new impact economy. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Tristan.